Reddit, what are some of scariest thing you've experienced you can't explain? Story 1, when I was a child. Both my parents went to work early, so they would drop me off at my grandmother's to eat breakfast and go to school from there. My grandmother died my junior year in high school, and I started coming straight home from school. During this time, my mother started complaining that, when she get home from work, the receiver of the phone, an 80s-style corded push-button phone, next to her bed was left off the base. I wasn't using the phone, but she would insist I must have because the phone was hung up properly when she left for work. One day I got home a little early. Now I need to pause and tell you about the layout of our apartment. From the front door, I looked directly into the living room, dining room, the door to the kitchen, and the short halfway that led to my parents' bedroom and my bedroom. There was no other door. The windows were old-fashioned narrow casement windows with screens, and we were on the 3rd floor. Anyway, as soon as I walked in the door, I clearly heard 2 footsteps in my parents' bedroom. I dropped my school bag and foolishly ran to the bedroom. It wasn't far and took only a few seconds. I got to the bedroom and no one was there. However, I immediately noticed that the receiver of the phone on my mother's bedside table was on the floor. It was placed so that the cord to the base was stretched out as far as it could go. I later tried to replicate the placement by shaking the table, tipping the phone, etc. I could never get the receiver off the base. When I finally resorted to knocking it off with a finger, it would fall on the table or next to it. The only way I could replicate the placement of the receiver where I found it was to carefully stretch the cord, place it, and hold it for a few moments. It could not have gotten to that spot by accident. When I found the phone, I hung it up, and it immediately rang. I answered it, and it was my dad. He asked what was wrong. I asked him why he asked. He said he had called, apparently just before I got home, and someone, he thought it was me, answered the phone but never said anything. He finally hung up and had been trying to call back, and only got through after I hung up the phone. I've never figured out what happened. I definitely heard footsteps, and I'm just as certain there was no one there. No one went by me. The windows in the bedroom were not disturbed, and my parents had too much stuff under the bed and in the closet for anyone bigger than an infant to hide in either spot. Also, after this, my mother never found the phone disturbed again. Story 2, I have one story, though I can explain it. I used to work as a security guard for an office building. Every once in a while, I'd do my rounds, building would be completely empty except for me. Then I'd sit at the security desk and watch the cameras. But then the CFO would suddenly appear on the cameras, on the 1st floor. He would literally just appear in his office. Even after I had checked his office was empty, he'd walk around the 1st floor for a bit, go back to his office, and completely disappear again. I'd go round the 1st floor, but I'd never see him in person. I'd only ever see him on the cameras. Used to scare the shit out of me. I ended up recording the CCTV and showed the security supervisor it, which led to HR questioning him about sneaking into the office after dark. Turned out, behind some filing cabinets in his office, there was this little hatch door which led to this vertical passageway with a ladder that was connected to the basement. Guy got divorced the month before and lost the house he was living in that tiny passageway with a sleeping bag. Story 3, I've seen some pretty wild stuff in my life, but most of it is explainable. The one event that comes to mind was witnessed by my dad, brother, and myself, and it's a 2-part encounter, but I still consider it one event. This is a bit long, and I apologize, but I feel it might be worth the read. It was around 1998. My family and I had just moved into an old clapboard house on the edge of town. It had a huge backyard with a 6-foot wooden privacy fence on one side, and a metal chain-link fence, about 4.5 feet high around the other 3 sides of the yard. Neighbors on one side, the privacy fence side, a small grass alley that ran behind the back with a street light, and then another yard, etc. Our bedroom was an old converted sunroom on the back of the house that faces the backyard. It had floor-to-ceiling windows all along the back wall, looking into the backyard. We didn't have many options as to where to place our beds, so my headboard was against the windows, and my brother's bed was about 8 feet away with his headboard against the opposite wall with the foot of the bed facing the windows. One night we were up pretty late. I was in my bed, and he was in his just talking about random things when suddenly he got quiet. I figured he fell asleep, but then I heard him whispering in a shaky breath, so I'm like, what? And I hear him whisper again. So again I'm like, speak up, I can't hear you, and he goes, don't move. And be quiet, in a forced whisper, but I, thinking he's messing with me and like, bitch what? And I'm looking at him, and mind you, my head is to the windows, and he's pointing into the backyard behind my bed. So quickly sit up and turn around and see this huge dog head, staring almost nose to glass through the window, right behind my bed. I'm almost nose to nose with this thing, just a single pane of glass, and about 10 inches of empty air separate me for this thing. Now when I say I screamed, I mean I screamed. Not my proudest moment, but hey, I was like 10 years old. Well, anyways, the thing quickly ducked under the window, and then ran to the side of the yard, and jumped the 4.5 FT chain link fence, and bolted off into the darkness. My dad came running into the room with our mom, right on his heels. We were able to get out that something was looking through our window. So Dad ran back to his room and grabbed his shotgun, and then headed out the side door of the house and into the backyard. Unfortunately, or fortunately, he didn't find anything, wrote it off as I had a nightmare. And my brother wouldn't admit to seeing anything, so I took the blame and was told to quit messing around, go back to bed, typical parent response, etc. Well, later that night, maybe an hour or so, after I begged my parents to let me sleep in the living room because leaving the house wasn't an option and still being refused, I was made to sleep in my room. So again, my brother and I are in our room with these floor-to-ceiling windows. We are just completely rattled. We are both huddled in his bed, staring out the windows, when we see this thing come walking along the chain-link fence on all fours. And the fence only comes up to its mid-shoulder, so this thing is huge. It sniffs the ground, does a few circles, and then hops the fence into the backyard like it's nothing. It walks over to the window, and again gets nose to the glass like it's trying to see in. We are panicking the whole time. Well, my brother is like, fuck this, and soon as he steps off the bed, we hear this loud bang, and there is a flash of light. The thing at the windows gets knocked sideways, and without even missing a beat, it turns and runs across the full length of backyard, jumps the back chain-link fence. It cleared the fence the alleyway, and then landed in the back neighbor's yard. This is easily a 15-20-foot jump minimum, clearing their fence like it was nothing, and was gone at a dead run, up beside that house and off into the darkness on the other side. My dad comes tearing around the side of the house with his shotgun in hand, and makes a mad dash for the side door and slams it shut behind him. He is screaming and hollering, we gotta go. We pack up and head to a hotel that night. My mom absolutely refused to believe we saw what we said we saw, and we only lived there for about 6 months. It rattled my dad so much he didn't even want to come back. He told my mom that we were just gonna move that next day, but she wouldn't allow it. After about 6 months, she conceded, and we moved. Mind you, this is in the coastal plains region of Texas. We have no large wild canines here. We have stray dogs and coyotes, but nothing that would even remotely touch on how big this thing was. My dad swears he shot that thing with a slug from about 15 feet away, with his 12-gauge shotgun right underneath its left arm, hitting it in the ribs where its vital organs are, and nothing, it just ran off. He said the thing that freaked him out the most was that, when he saw the thing jump the fence, it walked towards our window crouched, but still on its hind legs. It wasn't walking on all fours, and then when it got to our window, it stood up straighter, and he could tell that while it looked like a dog, its body was shaped wrong. He said it looked like a really stocky person wearing a dog suit, but he could tell it wasn't a suit. Also that when it was walking in circles, sniffing the ground, before coming into our yard, the second time it wasn't actually sniffing the ground like for a scent. It was staring at our window with its face to the ground, like it was acting like it was sniffing the ground, almost as if it was playing a part to see if anyone would notice it. He said he's had dogs his whole life, and everything about what it was doing was wrong. A while later, I asked my dad why he was in the backyard if he thought I was having a nightmare, and he told me my brother is the one that gave it away. He said, with how panicked I looked, that my brother was almost white as a sheet and wouldn't take his eyes off the window. He said, your brother has never looked so scared, and never been one with just making stuff up. So after going back to his room with my mom, as he was laying there thinking about it, he decided that if my brother was a white, as he was then, we had to have seen something. So he grabbed his gun in case he had to scare some creeper out of our yard, and figured he was going to go through the garage and out by the far side of the house, and sneak to the corner to see if someone was peeking in our windows or if someone was actually messing with us. He never actually thought we saw a huge dog-looking thing, just that maybe with it being dark outside, and us being kids with overactive imaginations, maybe we just mistook someone as something. But when he saw that thing come up the side fence, and with the street light in the back alley lighting up the backyard, he saw it, and it freaked him out. He was going to creep back inside until it went up to our window, and he said as it stood up, he just got this instant feeling of just dread, like something was going to happen to us. Story 4, my very first job was as a radio DJ at a small, hometown radio station in the mid-1990s. This was a tiny building out in the middle of a field with a 500 FT antenna out back and a single road from the main road to the front door. The transmitter was right behind my studio, behind sound dampening glass, and had a light bulb that was always on. The station was so small that you could see the light bulb in the transmitter room all the way from the driveway/roadway. There were only 2 doors, the front door and the back door in the transmitter room. That door didn't even have a handle on the outside, and it was always locked from the inside. It's impossible to enter that door from the outside. I worked the evening shift, from 5 p.m. 10 p.m. After my shift, we actually went off the air for the night. I was always the last person there, so after I went off the air I had to pull commercials for the first hour or 2 of the morning show, clean dishes, finish up some production work, etc. After working there for a year or so, I had racked up a couple of weird experiences. Shadows scurrying about at the corner of my vision. Lights turning off and on. One evening, after getting in and taking over the board, I was just sitting there preparing myself mentally for the next 5 hours. I looked up, out the studio doors towards the front door, and I saw the perfect shadow shape of a man who was probably 6 tall. It was there, then not. I went to my boss, who was not a nice person on her nicest days, and said so. I have a weird question. She sighed and looked at me, expecting who knows what. Have you ever felt like someone was here who wasn't? My boss yelled across the building for someone to come into her office. When that person arrived, she tilted her head at me. He's seen Jimmy, supposedly. Everyone had seen Jimmy, the original owner of the radio station. He popped in from time to time. He won't hurt you, he's just checking in on the station. So from then on, Jimmy would make his appearances. His was a harmless presence. My studio faced another, unused studio, and he would flash the lights on and off a few times. I'd say, "Hi, Jimmy. Everything's going well." And it would stop. He turned a water faucet on once. He whispered my name in my ear one night, which freaked me out. At least I think it was him. You see, there was another malevolent being that also lived there at the station. It didn't have a name, and it was about shin-high. This one always gave me a really bad feeling. It was the one who would dart beside me, its shadow just in the corner of my eye. I always knew it was there, just because I would feel downright freaked out. One night in particular was the scariest I've ever been. Here it is 30-ish or so years later, and I still can't explain it. As soon as everyone left the building for the night, I got that feeling like it was there. I just turned on all the lights, turned the music up, and tried to ignore it. The longer the night went on, though, the worse it got. Lights were flashing everywhere. A dot matrix printer in the sales office started going on its own, something that never happened, and that office was locked. Then ceiling tiles starting moving up as if someone hit them with a broom handle. They started closest to me from my studio down the hall and ended at the front door, which was locked. Then the front door opened. A locked fucking door opened. I went down the hall to close and relock it. When I did, I saw through the door window that there was a coffee cup and a cigar on the front stoop. There was no reason for them to be there. On my way back to the studio, I got a big burst of cigar smell, like an invisible smoke cloud, right in my face. I knew my usual duties were required, but I didn't care at this point. I went off the air, grabbed my keys, and noped right the fuck out of it. I ran to my car, backed up, and looked through the front door. A figure was standing inside, silhouetted in front of the transmitter light. I peeled out and went straight home. Now all of that is screwy, but it's not the most unexplainable thing. Is it 100% impossible someone didn't somehow sneak in and play a very elaborate prank on me? No, there's a slight, minuscule chance someone did, but to this day I don't know how. It was an old, tiny building, but I still hold the possibility that it could have been a prank. I got home and told my mom this whole story. My heart was still pounding. She was all shooey, well, it's bedtime. So I go to my bedroom and dial up a BBS to write someone what had happened to me. As I was typing up the story, my modem speaker turned on. If you are old enough to remember dial-up modems, you know the speaker doesn't just turn on once the connection is made. They wouldn't even turn back on if someone in the house picked up the phone. You just get a lot of bad data on the screen, and your modem would disconnect. The speaker turns on, and a voice comes from the speaker mixed with the static of the data connection. It screeched, "Help me." The speaker then turned off, and nothing else changed on my screen. That speaker turning on, and the voice coming out is solidified in my brain. I remember the screech like it was yesterday. I have no explanation for it. My mom was the only other person in the house, and she wouldn't have done something like that. She couldn't have done something like that. It was the scariest night of my life. I am as skeptical as you can be about anything ghost or UFO related, but that night is beyond my ability to explain. As kind of a footnote to all of this, I go back to that station every now and then when I go home to visit. I still know some people who work there. Jimmy is still active and is well known by the staff. The little scary one, no one else has reported seeing him. Story 5 copied from an old comment of mine. At one of my previous sys admin jobs, we were closing down one of our smaller data centers as it was being consolidated into one of our larger ones. But we still had to have at least one person there in case of server issues that had to be dealt with on site. We rotated each week, on which one of us would do the overnights there. The place was reportedly haunted, by what I have no idea, just heard rumors from other coworkers when I hired in. So imagine a relatively large open office space that is completely void of all the cubicles, desks, etc., that are normally there, with just one desk and a few random cables hanging from the ceiling. Also, just the lights over my desk were working and bleeding out into my surroundings by about 3 FT. That was where I was for the week lol. I remember sitting there and just hearing ambient noise from the sort of far-off server room, fans, cooling system, etc., working on a server for a customer of ours and seeing something dart across the room in my peripheral vision. I looked up and didn't see anything, so figured my eyes were just tired from the screen light and making me see like those floaties when your eyes close too tightly. Went back to work, and then about 5 min later I saw it again. Although this time I heard the bathroom door open and shut. Big ass heavy door you pulled open, and the mechanism at top of door pulled it shut. Thought maybe one of my coworkers was here for a server fix, so got up and went to greet them and wait for them. About 10 min pass, and no one comes out of the bathroom. I go in to make sure they're not passed out or hurt. One of my coworkers suffered from seizures, but lo and behold, empty bathroom. Now I'm creeped out. Leave the bathroom, and this time see the shadow person thing on the other side of the room dart across again, but looking at it straight on and not from my peripheral vision. Quickly went over and threw the rest of the lights on, and started searching the whole office and server room for a coworker, as I was 100% sure they were fucking with me. Never found anyone. Rest of the night was uneventful, as well as the rest of the week, minus me basically shitting bricks sitting at my desk waiting for something else to happen. Story 6. So in college I studied in the UK. I lived in a house with a group of other American students that had stories of the ghost of a girl who passed away while living there. I never believed in any of it, but it was fun to play along. The kitchen had one way in and out, and right after you entered the kitchen to your right was a padlocked door to the cellar where she allegedly lived. I had the only key. We were all a little homesick near Thanksgiving, so decided to do a meal together. This required some creative cooking schedules due to small appliances in the kitchen. So one girl who didn't have class the next day offered to stay up late to get the turkey going. We went into the cellar the first, and only, time that evening to get larger cooking implements. At 2:04 in the morning, I wake up to my door rattling like someone was pushing against it. I assumed it was a housemate who just went to the wrong door. About 30 seconds later, when I hear a scratchy female voice softly saying, "Hello." Every 5 seconds or so, my window was open, and it sounded like it was coming from outside, so I get up to close my window as I assume it's some drunk girl walking back from the pub. I get to the window, and there's no one there, and then I hear, "Hello." Clear as a bell behind me, my door rattles again and goes silent. I've had night terrors before, and hallucinate when I have even a mild fever, so I assume I'm still asleep and lay back down. The next morning at 7 a.m., the girl who's cooking tells me I had the creepiest night. At 1:50 I heard footsteps coming up the cellar stairs, then the door rattled. Then at 2:10 the door rattled again, and I heard footsteps coming down. She told me this before I had said anything to anyone about what I'd experienced. Story 7, this isn't my story, it's my uncle's. A bit of backstory. He used to work on the London Underground doing maintenance to the tracks/tunnels, etc. Once he went into a tunnel with 2 other colleagues. They'd stopped to do something, and this man said to my uncle like, "Hey, uncle's name, can you show me the way out?" My uncle, thinking it was one of his guys, said, "You know the way out." I think he was so engrossed in his work that he didn't turn around to see this bloke to start with. So this guy says, "I'm so cold." Then my uncle said he immediately felt dead cold, and the air around him dropped. Not sure what he meant by that. So my uncle turns round and shines a light on him. My uncle said to me this bloke is what he would call a ghost standing there. He was holding a really old/vintage lamp and wearing a really old dirty uniform. He said the feeling he got was so strange, as if he knew this bloke was a ghost. The bloke just kept saying over and over again, "I'm so cold. I'm so cold." My uncle eventually said to this guy, "I don't think you're supposed to be here, mate. Can you see a light anywhere?" And he looked dead at my uncle and said, "Can you help me? I'm so cold." I'm unsure if the colleagues came to see who my uncle was talking to, but one of them tried to approach this bloke, thinking it was someone in their team playing a joke, and this bloke just disappeared right in front of their eyes. All of them freaked out and ran. They refused to go back into the tunnel. My uncle and 2 colleagues refused to go down that tunnel again. Some other colleagues have said they've seen this bloke, and he always says how cold he is. My uncle's retired now, but says he thinks of this bloke from time to time. Story 8, okay, so not something I *SAW*, but something I was told someone else saw. Here's the story. My ex-GF passed away years ago. Before she passed, me and brother lived together, and my brother had a big pit bull named Max. Max was an awesome dog, and she was a big animal lover, and she knew Max very well. I eventually moved out. He got a GF who had a kid and needed the space. Okay, that's established. Of note, my ex-GF had long blonde hair, was in her 30s, and she was buried in a pink sweater. A few months after she passed, my brother took them all on a vacation and asked me if I could watch the dog, feed him, etc. I said yes, of course. They kept him crated, and the crate was in his GF's daughter's room, kind of a big basement room. I hung out with the dog and eventually had to leave, so I put him back in his crate. I felt bad, but I had to. Before I left, I looked up the sky and said, "Meg, if you're still around, please keep Max company, he's gonna be lonely." So I go home, my brother comes back, whatever. A few months later, I'm talking to his GF in her 30s, and we're talking about ghost stuff. She tells me that her house is haunted. I'm like, "No way, I'm there all the time, I've never seen anything." She explains to me that it seemed to happen out of nowhere. She hadn't seen anything, but her daughter, around 5 or 6 years old, told her that sometimes when Max is barking or freaking out for whatever reason, her daughter tells her she sees a lady about mommy's age with long blonde hair wearing a pink sweater, who calms down the dog. I'm pretty sure I invited a ghost in their house, but I'm damn happy that I did. I wish I could have seen her. Story 9, I was about 12 at the time. Every year my parents and I would drive from Montreal to Nova Scotia to visit family. Having always gone the Trans-Canada route, we decided to go through the States for a change. So we ended up going SC through Maine and eventually on to NB, then NS. I remember we were in a very, very remote area, like hadn't seen a house for a long time. This was before GPS and Google Maps, so there was a growing concern in the vehicle that we might run out of gas. I don't remember the name of the road, but it was a country road that had mountain on the right side, went straight up through dense bush. And on the left it was dense bush, and a steep downhill where I could make out a river at the bottom of the cliff, about a 75-100 down the hill. Trees hung over the road, so despite it being a sunny day, the road was shady, with the exception of places where the sun would break through. I heard my dad up front ask Mom, "What the fuck is that up ahead?" As I leaned over to look up down the road, we could all see what looked like a man off in the distance on the side of the road. Too far to see color or anything, just a big dark shape standing there. As we rolled on down the road, this dude or whatever it was crossed the road both lanes, and I shot you not 3-4 steps. Once on the other side of the roads, just vanished into the woods. As we got to the spot where he had crossed, Dad slowed right down to look around. Nothing, not a sight of anyone, no trail, nothing. No one knows what they saw, but 30 years later it gets brought up every couple of years, and the feelings are mutual, fucking weird and creepy. Story 10. Back in college, me and my girlfriend would go back to her parents' old farmhouse and fool around after class. There was never anybody home. One afternoon, I'm standing in her kitchen, thirstily guzzling a post-sex Gatorade. Behind me was a back staircase leading to the second floor of the house. When I finished my drink and turned to leave the room, I noticed a little girl between 7-10 YO standing on the bottom step. My first thought was, oh crap, why didn't my girlfriend tell me there was a little girl in the house? I really hope she didn't hear what we were up to. But before I could speak, I realized something was off. She was semi-transparent and oddly two-dimensional in a way I can't articulate. Slowly, I came to the realization that I was staring at a ghost. There was nothing inherently frightening about the experience. Knowing I was in the presence of something unexplainable, I did everything in my power not to blink. I stared at her for a good 10-15 seconds, taking in every detail I could. She had a red and yellow summer dress on. Long blonde hair that was tied into a couple of those old-timey braids at the end. Black strapped shoes. Overall look gave me a 1940s, 1970s vibe. Fortunately for her, she seemed to have no idea I existed. She stood on the bottom step, looking out the back window towards the driveway like she was waiting for someone to arrive. I never took my eyes off her. Eventually she was just gone. I never believed in ghosts before that. I still don't believe in intelligent hauntings, but I'll certainly entertain the idea of residual energy and echoes of the past.